So I started MenTions, Stories About Us, last year during the pandemic, or actually when the pandemic just started. I started it in April. That's when I launched it. And it's something that I wanted to do for quite some time. I realized that a lot of focus has been on women in the past, and not a lot of focus has been on men and male issues. But particularly for somebody like me, I did not see men who, like me, who are my age group and who look like me, represented. And I really firmly believe that representation matters, and we have to see positive representations of ourselves. On the media and other fora, you tend to see images of men with their pants sagging underneath their butts, men on the block, men incarcerated, or the current narrative about men being absent fathers. But I know quite a number of men who are like me, my age, who are doing great things. And MenTions was really meant to highlight those men who are doing great things between the ages of 25 to 45, because I fall within the middle of that range. The feedback from MenTions has been great, from the launch has been great. On average, our stories on average may have possibly over 50,000 reach on Facebook, and that's just by measure of the number of people who share the posts on their platforms and the people who will have access to their own platforms. So the stories have been shared a lot, and I have received some positive feedback also through the media. So it's really been a positive step for me, and Denzel, you would probably recognize that I prefer to feature the men and have them be the forefront versus me, because I believe that the stories are really about the men. It's less about me as the creator. I am just the innovator and the person conceptualized it. But I prefer that the men are the stories, and we have featured great men so far, from doctors to graphic designers to attorneys to entrepreneurs, to creative persons, artists, people like you also were featured, people with their own business, ICT people, AV technicians, people who are specialists in that audiovisual field. So we have featured a cross-section of individuals, of men, and the intent is really to show the possibilities of who young Black men can be. We don't always all have to be policemen, army men, teachers, or even attorneys, doctors, or engineers, but we can be other people in other fields, graphic designers, spoken word artists, and just really just positive representations in our country and contributing to society. I will say that I think that there are issues. The issues occur because of lack of understanding, but also lack of willingness to understand. Lack of understanding is one thing, but I think both genders need to understand each other, and that's part of where the issues that's where the issues lie. The understanding, the support, but also holding the other gender accountable for things that they may do to the other. Quite often, men are held accountable and men are blamed for things, but what role does the woman play in all of this? And that's something that needs to be admitted and needs to be acknowledged. And even for the men, because as I said, a lot of blame is thrown the way of the man, but also not often the woman may acknowledge her role in some of the issues. And I think if we are to be mature as a society, we have to acknowledge that both genders play a role in improving the relationship, but also improving the understanding of issues related to each gender. So I think, one, it's understanding, but it's also admitting and being mature enough that change is needed and we need to improve. Right. So I think there are issues related to the relationship between men and women, but there are also negative things that come out of the relationship between men and women. If we look at issues like domestic violence, and recently, I wouldn't name the manufacturer, but a specific beer manufacturer came up with a campaign highlighting domestic violence, and that was big. That's hardly ever done, and really actually calling men out and holding men accountable for some of their actions and their role in domestic violence. And that's something that really was never done before. But you also have men and other, not just men, but companies speaking out about these issues. And these are big steps. These are steps that are required if we want to change the outcome of these broken relationships or these dysfunctional relationships. So these are positives. I think it's important that also that men listen to women, also women listen to men, and also understand where they're coming from and their views. While men traditionally are not known to be the talkers and the ones to express themselves in a particular way, but I think that also once men start to talk and articulate their issues, also I think women need to be a little bit more understanding and patient in that regard. And society, not just women being patient with men, but also society being patient with the man, and allowing the man to air his views and air his concerns and the issues that bother him. It may be weird and an anomaly for a man sometimes to speak out very confidently about these issues, but I think slowly that's happening, and we're seeing safer spaces for men to do just that. I think just ventilating the issues, I think that we need to identify what the issues are. I think once we identify so many of the issues that we know exist and we bring it to the fore, and we come from a place of not necessarily casting blame, but being mature enough to identify and to throw the issues where they reside, I think that's the first step in trying to fix them. By literally being mature, being frank, being open-minded, but also being willing to acknowledge, okay, these are the issues that we need to fix, these are the issues that we want change, and how do we move forward? I think that a lot of time, too much time rather, is spent on talking and not devising a plan or a strategy for the way forward and how to deal with these issues. And I think if we move forward from that, by first identifying the issues clearly, looking at some of the core problems, some of the core reasons why these issues exist, and then the key actors or perpetrators of these issues, then we could move forward positively with some purpose, I think. I cannot say, to be very honest, what formal places there are. I do know, however, that there are various individuals who have championed and who are working on places like that in their own way. There is Garth Wanzer, who is a Trinbagonian national, a Trinbagonian, but who resides abroad. But he's created this project called the Dear Men Project. And it really is to create a safe space where men can speak about issues, can interact in a positive way, and where the environment is created for them to discuss issues and ventilate things and just speak about things that may be bothering them. I know recently a local media house launched a show, and that was a good step too, speaking about issues related to men. It was not necessarily a physical space, but I guess now with COVID, no space is physical. So they really discussed a wide range of issues affecting men, dealing with men. But there are also other individuals, like Delson Charles is another one, who is a therapist, and he really discusses issues related to men and sort of pulls apart the issues and just gives different perspectives, and from the scientific point of view to really the realistic slant to it. So he creates some balance in how the issues are discussed. And Delson is great, also Garth is great, and again there is that media house that did that program. So there are things happening, whether there's a formal, as I said, physical place or a structure or a building that men could go to, I don't know. And maybe that's the problem. But there is also Carryman that's also doing great things too. That I know that they have been doing great things. They've had various workshops and webinars and conferences, and they have a very active presence on online presence where they engage and all of that. They did something for Father's Day recently. So there are organizations, I think, that are doing things, whether they're as widely known as, say, the female issues and the female organizations, I would say no. But I think all the flip side of it, Denzel, is that if men really want help, they also should seek that help. Or not all the time things may fall in our laps and you'll just get a fly in your mailbox or an email in your inbox stating this is a place for men to help you. No, I think if men really want help, they can also ask for it and seek out that help and search for that help, and they will get options. I think it doesn't. I would admit that. I don't think we've come to a place where that is something that men actively are known for doing. It's not popular. Um, but I think the flip side of it is that we need to, one, sensitize the population and the society about the issues affecting men, and just really having that conversation about who a man is in terms of the issues and the issues related to lack of an absence of really articulating his feelings and his emotions. That's not something most men are known for. And I think if one society starts to understand that and starts to probably be a little bit more sensitized about the signs, if a man decides that he wants to reach out but may not actually articulate, I need help or I need assistance with this, but to look at the signs. Maybe if you're having a conversation with a man and he brings up some random topic, I don't know, about alcoholism, I don't know, I'm just giving an example, but and he tries to place it into a context, but he will not come out to say, maybe I need help because I'm an alcoholic. Maybe the person who he's speaking to needs to be sensitized enough and aware that maybe this person is asking for help. So that was just an example, but it's just a way that I think men can and women can be a little bit more aware and sensitized to some of the issues affecting men, but also how men behave and how some of the ways that most men, because not all, some are very confident and are emotionally grounded and are aware and self-aware and will feel confident reaching out, but others, and the majority, do not. The whole reason I started MenTions was because I felt the media was not portraying men, and particular Afro-Trinbagonian men, in a positive light. While I agree that there are negative images and those aspects do exist, I'm not denying that at all. But in terms of the balance, there's clearly an imbalance. And it's important for men to see themselves in positive lights, for individuals. Not if you look at the whole of the movements in the US, representation matters and positive representation matters. And we need to have more positive images of men, not necessarily Black men, but just men in general, men doing things. I mean, we have great examples of men in our country who are doing and have been doing great things. If you look at the older generation, the Norman Christies, the Gervais Warners, the Dulal Whiteways, and other men. I mean, I specifically signal Black men, but I mean, there are other men in our society who are doing things, great positive images of and examples of sportsmen and authors but people, we need to see those images. There needs to be balance. There needs to be greater focus on positive representation, not just the negatives, not just the news stories. Yes, the news and those things sell, and these media houses, they may have their target audience and the issues that they want to address, but at the end of the day, we need to have more positive representation of men in general, because the examples do exist. There are positive representations. I mean, I may not be a positive representation in many people's eyes, but there are people like you. There are just so many people around. I mean, if I, in just a space of less than a year, have been able to get over 50 men to tell their stories and their journeys, that means that there are so many others around, and not just men who may have fat bank accounts or may have all these numerous awards, but there are men doing great things. And they are great and are contributing greatly to society. Some of them are contributing greatly to their communities and being great fathers. And that's a story that is not often told. we're not seen, we're not told, sorry, or where we don't see the images of positive men. You hear so much the talk about deadbeat fathers, and don't get me wrong, I think there may be many, but there are also quite a number of positive men doing great things, and we need to show those. We need to see the balance. So the media, they have a great and a critical role to play, but not just the traditional media, don't get me wrong, not just the radio and the television and the print. Even on social media, even on the images of that we see online and on the internet and on websites and all other forms of digital media, the media generally, they have a big role to play. I think it is. I think it is. We're seeing different images being portrayed across all media. We're seeing different images of men portrayed. That sort of breaks the stereotype a little bit. In some cases, we're seeing men, while men are always known to be, and this is just an example, while men have always been known to be fairly well dressed and all of that, but now you're seeing greater and more images of men taking better care of themselves, physical appearance and all of that, and that is some move that ideally you may not have always associated that with masculinity. And so I just think generally the images and our perception of what a man is has changed and is changing in some way or form. Whether it's changing rapidly, I don't know. That aspect I can't give too much information on in terms of from a data-driven perspective. But I do think just from my own observations and anecdotal evidence, I do think it's changing, that view of how society views a man. But again, it also depends on where you go and who you talk to. You could speak to the older generation and they may have a clear view of what they think a man is, and then the younger generation will give you examples why they think it's changing and why they think that it's no longer X and Y, but we are seeing that it could be Z, if you understand what I'm saying. It's no longer clear cut, this and that, but it could be, all of the above. It could be X, Y, and Z versus just X and Y. You know what I mean? You're taking me into a realm I'm not too familiar, but I will say though that for people who have strong Christian beliefs and people who are driven and influenced by the Bible and other religions that may have similar teachings, they believe that the man is head of the household, and they believe that there are certain responsibilities that are attributed to a man, and that there are certain responsibilities and duties that are attributed to a woman. So that may not change, those views may not change as long as people hold fast to those spiritual and religious based views and doctrines. But for people who may be a little bit more liberal, it is changing, and they may have a different view of what they think a man should be. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I believe that men need to realize that self-care is a real thing. It's not something that's just made up. It's not something that women do. Self-care is a real thing, and men need to find that time to have timeouts, find that time to have alone moments, find that time to go for long walks, long drives, and listen to themselves and analyze their issues, and also take care of the physical health. But self-care, part of it is also the physical health. Take care of your bodies, listen to your bodies, and not just feel that going to the doctor is for only when you're extremely sick or on death's door. Because traditionally, if we want to go with stereotypes, men do not like to go to the doctor. And I think now with COVID, it's even more important for men to listen to themselves from an emotional level, from a psychological level, and also from a physical level. You may be experiencing something that your body is telling your body is off whack, that's off whack with your body, and you may not know. And it's good to always check yourself. I know there are certain periods when men should get certain checks done, prostate checks and all these things. So physically, men need to take care of themselves, but mentally, men need to take care of themselves. As I said, go for long walks, go to the beach, do something fun. But in addition to that, men should also be empowered, I think, to speak to other men about issues and to try to find that safe space where they feel empowered to talk about issues. It's not something that's done in the Caribbean, as I said, but I do know there are organizations that are creating that safe space for that. And they may not be as widely known now, but as I said, I know there's Carryman, there's the DMN Project, there is Delison Charles. He has an online platform called Delhi Digest. So there are people who are really creating that safe space for men to talk about issues and to really ventilate issues and just air their feelings. And it doesn't have to be a sappy fest or a sappy moment, but just honest discussions about issues that are affecting men and that may be affecting men and that may be affecting them personally. But again, so my main thing is that self-care is not something that's a made-up thing. It's something that men should really take seriously, their emotional, physical, psychological well-being. And that's important, I think.